and has distributed more than $110 billion in funding to states, with much more on the way. However, politicians lack the support to complete two projects at once. Just months after the passing of the infrastructure bill, Bliss of Bloomberg reports in 2022 that few elected leaders are willing to confront the mighty challenge of altering America's car-centric way of life. New projects would face backlash from auto and oil lobbyists, sapping desperately needed political capital. And aside from a budgetary standpoint, Snyder 22 Politico finds state officials will only add new projects to their infrastructure plans if they replace existing ones. In the wake of record inflation, there simply isn't enough room in the budget for more. In fact, O'Toole 21 from Cato finds high-speed rail would add more than $4 trillion to the federal debt. Track costs $200 million a mile. Systems are expensive to maintain, such as the requirement to replace rails every 10 years. Aside from that astronomically high price tag, the difficulties don't end. Gordon 21 of Vice explains that a national high-speed rail raises concerns regarding land acquisition, environmental standards, and lawsuits about regulations. Consequently, it's clear the project's benefits are overshadowed by its costs. Samuelson 10 of RCP finds America's geography and suburbanization make rail travel impractical. While international systems have city plans built around public transit, America remains centered around highways. Trip destinations are too dispersed to support rail service. And through maintenance and subsidy costs, the Cato Institute ultimately explains in 2009 that interstate rail systems or interstate highway systems are 10 times more cost-effective compared to high-speed rail. A pivot away now from the road to prosperity would be devastating. Shaper 21 of NPR concludes, in an absence of infrastructure development, the United States will lose $10 trillion in economic growth every year by 2030, with hundreds of thousands of Americans losing their jobs and millions more bearing the brunt of negative spillovers. Contention 2 is terror. High-speed rail hands terrorists a golden opportunity. Rider 10 writes, a bullet train will be a plane flying at ground level. Planes are hard to bring down. For high-speed rail, all a terrorist needs is a small explosive on the track. 3 trains must be demolished to kill the same number as 9/11 with no loss of life to terrorists. Concluding one disastrous bombing will be the end of high-speed rail. Trains will be slowed, passenger traffic will plummet. Beyond the body count, Merlot 11 furthers, high-speed rails provide a tempting target for those who wish to destroy an icon of Western values, especially if the nation just invested a staggering sum. Further, in a new high-speed rail will include a great deal of digital tech. Derailing and other disasters can be staged simply by hacking or introducing malware. Catastrophe with erupt. Blair 16 writes, a 9/11 event with a voter need to attack right away. That's devastating. PSR 15 finds 12 years of the war on terror killed 2 million. Thus, we're proud to negate.
Awesome. Stella, do you need any pieces of evidence?
Can I? Honestly, I'm good.
All right. I'm currently sending our case into the email chain, including the evidence. If everyone is ready, are you ready to listen to the first affirmative constructed? Cool. We affirm, without drastic action, the U.S. economy is on the brink of another dangerous slowdown. Both 20 finds that the majority of U.S. economists agree that the U.S. is in store for a recession next year. Thus, the economy needs to be revitalized now more than ever. High-speed rail is the right solution at the right time. Contention 1 is unemployment. The Department of Labor just this June indicates that the employment was 3.6%, essentially unchanged at 6 million unemployed workers. Luckily, high-speed rail solves this in 2 key ways. The first is generating jobs. In the short term, Kunz 18 writes that high-speed rail will create millions of well-paying jobs building the infrastructure and managing the rail systems. In the US specifically, the APTA 19 quantifies that every $1 billion in investment creates 24,000 jobs. Mallet 20 reports that beyond this, the new high-speed rail bill would invest $205 billion, thus resulting in 4.9 million jobs. Specifically, these are all union jobs, as Restucia 22 reports that President Biden signed an executive order the government entered into agreement with labor unions for federal construction projects. Union jobs, as the 2020 Economic Policy Institute report explains, have been able to secure enhanced safety measures, additional premium pay, and paid sick leave. On average, a worker covered by a union contract earns 11.2% more in wages. Job creation does not stop there. Weight 21 contextualizes that by connecting different regions, they often offer more choice and options for workers and more access to talent for employers. Imagine employers in California that now can have equal access to Oakland and Los Angeles employees. Therefore, beyond the 4.9 million jobs created immediately, Moulton 20 finds that high-speed rail will create more than 1.16 million jobs per year. The second way high-speed rail addresses unemployment is through small businesses. Specifically, Cardin 21 finds that the government-wide federal contracting goal for small disadvantaged businesses increased the contracting goal for small businesses immediately to 11%. This has historically helped uplift small businesses. For example, in California, the Economic Analysis Report 22 found that professional service contractors collectively have a 28.2% small business utilization. 634 small businesses were either committed, utilized, or actively working on the project. The impact is twofold. The first is reducing unemployment. Callahan 22 reports that each additional micro business per 100 people causes a 0.05% reduction in that county's unemployment rate, potentially lifting over 300,000 people out of unemployment. The second impact is empowering women. The SBA explains that the federal government's goal is to award at least 5% of all federal contracting dollars to women-owned small businesses. This is key to empowering women entrepreneurs. As Rafi 20 explains, if more women had equal access to entrepreneurship opportunities and in turn were able to start accumulating wealth, the gender wealth gap could begin to reduce further. Contention 2 is creating affordable housing. Affordable housing is currently a right denied to most Americans, as Bonnie 20 found this July that home prices hit a new all-time high in June. Fortunately, federal investment into high-speed rail reverses this trend, as Cons 20 finds that high-speed rail helps solve the affordable housing crisis by taking pressure off the high-priced hotspots. Indeed, Harvard 19 explains that high-speed rail increases the convenience of living in outlying suburbs of crowded and expensive cities, making housing much more affordable for people working in those cities. This is historically proven. Nicholsburg 18 confirms that in regions which were affected by high-speed rail, reduced land prices by 33% in the current year. This success story happened everywhere in the world. Harvard 19 finds that in studies suggest that the observations in Japan's 55 years of high-speed rail supply apply to those other systems as well. The impact is poverty alleviation. The National Low-Income Housing Coalition finds that addressing housing affordability is the most cost-effective way of lifting people out of poverty. Indeed, CBR 17 finds that California alone, increasing costs at this level are likely to bring currently approved developments to a halt, produce a loss of $20.9 billion to total state incomes to lift people out of poverty, affirm.
Are you ready for crossfire?
Yeah, for sure. You can
Yeah, so let's talk about unemployment. So the unemployment rate you say is 3.6%, right?
No, we cite the number for you, 6 million people.
But the rate in the population is 3.6%, right?
Yeah.
What does the United States population or unemployment rate average at?
It's definitely lower. It's higher than 3.6%, but I will tell you that the 3.6% are still millions and millions of unemployed people that probably are left behind the most, because politicians are making the same arguments as you, saying that it's the lowest ever, we should not care about them.
Well,
Instead,
yeah, but
go ahead.
Really quick, can I follow up? But there's also a natural rate of unemployment, right? You never expect an economy to be fully employed at all times, right? Even if jobs were available.
I wouldn't say I would say it's obviously a utopia that we give everyone a job, right? But just because it's a utopia doesn't mean we should go and try and make sure people have income in order to feed their families and have a roof over their heads. May I have a question, please?
Go ahead.
On your first argument, your case is basically saying that the infrastructure bill is not going to be passed, right?
No, our case is that the infrastructure bill has been passed and it is working right now. But if you adopt the high-speed rail, it trades off with the infrastructure bill. We no longer repair existing infrastructure.
Let's say the Congress does pass a bill and then immediately after it just goes you know what, never mind. We have to spend this time on somewhere else. How would that act in front of the American public?
It's not immediately after. It's been a year since the bill is passed, but more specifically, we would say the scenario of us adopting high-speed rail isn't very realistic either, because we passed the infrastructure bill. So in a world where we have to do something that we wouldn't do, it would lead to a trade-off. May I have a question?
Really quick though, passing the high-speed rail is the topic, so we do get access to that. You can't.
Well, yes, I agree. I agree. You pass a high-speed rail, which leads to the infrastructure bill being dropped. That's our argument. May I have a question?
But yeah, for sure. Go ahead.
Okay, so why are housing prices so high?
I would say that housing prices are so high because of numerous things like inflation, or just housing being so despair. Our argument isn't that housing price. Go ahead, actually.
But inflation would cause the price of everything to be high. Why are housing prices specifically so high in America?
Using our case, we probably argue it's because the urban cities are overcrowded, and in rural regions where the prices are really low.
Okay, but housing prices are pretty high in rural America too. It's not just urban America. None of your evidence says that. So why are housing prices across the board high?
That's not true. I would say our link evidence makes it extremely explicit that it's because the overcrowding and the gathering of resources that has made urban housing prices so high, and therefore it's a problem that we need to solve by affirming.
Your link evidence is talking about China. I'm asking in America, why are housing prices so high?
I believe I gave you multiple reasons and it's not satisfying you. Do you want to just tell me instead?
It's because there's not enough houses in America between rural and urban America, like combined.
Okay, cool. We'll contest that, but that's cross.
Okay, that should be good unless Jay, you want to call me? Okay, cool. So it'll start with the observation, so like an overview, and then down the case. Ryan, second speaker for you, Dinah, and then Egg. Everyone good? Okay, cool. Time will start on my first word. Every single high-speed rail in the past, whether it be China, Japan, Europe, etc., has always failed and will continue to do so for three reasons. And the first is lobbying. Sheltec21 explains that because high-speed rail would detract from their industries, lobbyists from the fossil fuel industry would ensure never got past the planning stage, which is why in the infrastructure bill, it originally had a high-speed rail clause that was slashed for final result. Second is backlash. As red states hate the concept of HSR, Nixon 14 explains that Florida, Ohio, and Wisconsin, all led by Republican governors, canceled high-speed rail projects and returned federal funds, deeming the projects too expensive and unnecessary. And the third is workers. With an aging population and a focus on the tech sector, the US DOT09 explains that growing retirements throughout the rail sector result in a shrinking pool of experts, including engineers, planners, and managers. Expertise is likely to lag behind in the need of a new major program. At the top, they try to claim a recession is coming with zero reason why. If you look at the numbers, the Washington Post finds just a month later that their evidence is that unemployment has been the lowest it's been in 20 years. GDP has risen by 7.8%. And the fact that we're already incredibly close to the natural rate of unemployment and that the status quo is moving towards gradual improvement should be a reason to negate. Don't risk that by affirming. Let's deal with their individual argument about jobs. First, the Lebowski evidence from our case indicates that the infrastructure bill is set to reinvigorate the industry with hundreds of projects already in place, so there's no need to affirm. Second, Flynn 22 finds that automation is projected to eliminate 73 million US jobs by 2030, or 46% of current jobs, and many of these will be in labor jobs like manufacturing and construction, because you can easily automate manual labor through machinery. And of the jobs that might be left over, CNBC reports in 2015 that Chinese firms were the ones building the rails, exporting their expertise, cheaper materials, and a larger pool of labor within American plans. Don't just take it from us, look to history. In California, the Gumbella evidence we read in case finds that despite spending billions of dollars, the project has yet to lay a single mile of track. Then on their argument of small business, Morse 21 explains that 17 million small businesses were created in 2022, and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which is what they talk about, is literally the infrastructure bill. If progress is being made, don't fix what isn't broken. Prefer us here because their EAR evidence doesn't mention the words high-speed rail once. Their 28% statistic is completely unrelated. If anything, small businesses aren't equipped to handle high-speed rail. There are zero businesses that are small in the infrastructure department because they're all in things like retail or amenities. A nationwide project isn't going to be feasible, and the government will always turn to big businesses instead, making the issue worse. Lastly, you can turn their argument against them because of industrial gentrification. Lin 20 explains that industrial gentrification occurs when lower skill or lower wage industries are displaced by higher skill or higher wage industries. Obviously, companies like Google and Facebook will outcompete small firms, which cause the impacts they look to. And empirically in Japan, Coster 21 furthers that intermediate areas between high-speed rail caused employment to go down by 40% because of it. Then on their argument about affordable housing. This argument makes one critical assumption, and that there's houses in rural areas. But what Badger 22 explains is that the nation is currently short 3.8 million housing units. It doesn't matter if you bring HSR to a new apartment complex if all the rooms are full, and you prefer us here because none of their evidence is specific to rural America. It's talking about China. Additionally, high-speed rail would never actually stop in rural areas, but instead cut straight through them. There are no incentives for investors to stop a 200-mile-an-hour train just so they can pick up people from random rural regions. Stopping and starting the train over is just economically unfeasible, which is why Pool 21 indicates that low-income areas are generally selected because of land values were lower, which limits the cost of acquiring land rights via eminent domain. That's crucial because Lua 21 reports that with high-speed rail, rising house prices reflect public expectation of real estate appreciation, which prices out the people that they're trying to help. And if you look to China, Chin 13 of the World Bank confirms that investments are not evenly distributed. Countries in between rail lines saw a 6% decline in GDP because they're neglected in exchange for HSR. Lastly, we'd argue that America is not built for high-speed rail. Per the Samuel evidence in our case, our nation's unique suburbanization and geography prevent us from accessing the benefits, so highways are much more beneficial. Think about it logically. If someone's struggling with rent, they're going to pick up to a brand new state. They're going to utilize current infrastructure, which is what we should be focused on in today's round. Thus, we are proud to negate.
Cool. Can I please call for a few pieces of evidence?
Yeah.
Your third response on C1 about we're exporting like the Chinese workers. The responses to small businesses, can I see that 0 businesses inside construction are small? And then on C2, can I just see the first response that there are no houses in rural areas? Thanks. If you,
Second response was analytical. What was the third one?
the third one,
is in America, right?
Oh yeah. Jay, can you get that from the, I think, Double's email chain?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I see also 2 cards just really quickly on our second response against small businesses, the industrial gentrification, the decrease in 40% in intermediate cities, and then the chin card at the very bottom of your second response, if that's okay. We'll start running prep as soon as we see those cards in the email chain. Thank you.
yeah, we're happy to stay in period during this period as well.
So I got CNBC. I'll also get the 40% stat about Japan.
And I'll send the Badger evidence right now.
Let's see.
Badger just got sent.
Yeah, we'll let you know when we get it. There's a typhoon outside our window, so the internet might be a bit slow.
That's good. Okay.
Just let us know when all of them are sent and we'll just take prep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Mine should be sent, and I think Jay sent his slightly before. Yeah, I just got Jay's, so you should get mine any second now.
Cool. All right.
Cool, we'll start running prep beginning now.
And then just for the judges, was that speed good? Like clarity? Okay, cool.
Cool, that was a minute 23. So you can start your notes or your flow on the negative case, and then I will respond to the rebuttal you just heard down the affirmative case. All right, I'll signpost along the way. At the very top of their case, they basically tell you that HSR is always going to fail, and this is also the same thing they read at the top of our case. However, realize it doesn't matter, like at the point in which we create jobs as soon as you sign for the affirmative, even if at the end of the day, the project is never completed, you're still overall benefiting people by giving them a livelihood. For example, that's why Ferguson 22 finds, for example, in the construction industry specifically, there's more workers than jobs, which is why this program is so key right now, which is why Mulan 20 finds when you do HSR, you overall generate 1.16 million jobs per year, not just from construction, but also from maintenance and regional development. But with that being said, let's look at their contentions. First, on this 1 step forward, 2 steps back argument, there's 2 big problems here. First, the infrastructure bill, the thing is, these plans are already being passed right now, right? Buttigieg is already opening up new central highways, subways in different regions. Anderson from just 4 hours ago tells you that they've invested 50 million. They literally tell you there's 4,300 projects, infrastructure going around the world. Obviously, these politicians have enough political capital to actually invest in multiple projects at the same time. Don't let them tell you they can't focus on 2 types of projects, because obviously they are. But then they tell you that big oil is always going to lobby against HSR. This argument is really problematic insofar as they cite O'Toole and the Cato industry, which is funded by big oil. Their own evidence is, of course, against HSR because it's written by the people they literally tell you is trying to fight against it. That is why you don't buy their evidence. You prefer our evidence, which tells you, as Price then finds, that Americans support the building of HSR. 62% supports it, which means even if there's backlash from lobbying, overall the politicians will still do what's better for Americans. But then the last problem with this argument is that we would argue that at the end of the day, it's not about, like, they talk about how the geography of the US is not fit for this for HSR, but the problem is we're not talking about tourism spots, we're talking about opportunities to access cities, which HSR inherently brings. Even if tourist spots are too spread apart, access to the city is not. That is the key thing that HSR brings that uniquely changes in the status quo. But then let's go on to terror. The problem with this argument is twofold. First, they don't give you any reason that terrorists will ever target HSR. They just say, oh, you can put it on tracks, but realize that we've never seen that happen with Amtrak in the decades that it's been built. The reason why is because More 11 tells you that you actually have security measures that prevent people from making terror attacks happen. But second is actually, if you say that you can go around tracks, that actually increases jobs and maintain and supervise these tracks. Overall, that actually helps build jobs. With that being said, let's look at our case. They tell you that every HSR has failed because of lobbying, but realize, like I said, Americans support it. But second of all, they talk about backlash, but realize Counter 11 tells you that in Florida, there was actually Republican backlash when they rejected the HSR plan because they thought that the HSR plan would actually help benefit the economy. But second, on workers, like I addressed, Ferguson 22 tells you construction uniquely needs jobs right now. But then let's go on to they tell you that there's no recession. First, we tell you there's clearly increasing inflation right now. That means that it's a short-term solution, even right now, if inflation is going down. We would say this unemployment rate is actually not healthy because that's still 6 million people still needing jobs. It's not enduring transition because, like in the construction industry, we have a lack of jobs. That is why these unemployment numbers are not healthy. But second, they say automation is going to literally take over, but that's literally why we need more jobs. But then on small businesses, they tell you that actually no small businesses involved. That's empirically untrue. California involved over 600 small businesses. Obviously, HSR is a gold mine for these small businesses, which is why you don't prefer their analytic. You prefer our evidence that we tell you in case. But then they talk about industrial gentrification and about Japan, but realize the problem with this is that one, Japan is very different from America, like they tell you in terms of like population density and opportunities. But second, we tell you that the reason why this never happens is because small businesses, like in California, are grounded in those local communities. They don't actually leave those cities when they actually have these jobs, which is why in the United States it's very different. But finally, on housing, they basically tell you that there's not enough housing in rural areas, but obviously there are. But second of all, we're saying the problem is because prices are so high, no one's buying, so the people aren't building anymore. If you lower prices, people build more, there creates more houses. But finally, on eminent domain, realize empirically that has never happened with HSR in America. And the reason for that is because the Fifth Amendment literally requires the government to buy the land from the people at a fair price, which is why displacement has never really happened. Today's a very proud affirmative ballot.
Okay. Before I call Jay, can you point out to me in the email chain like the 600 card or whatever? 600 small businesses in California.
And can you also send the Ferguson evidence?
Cool. I'll send Ferguson. Basically,
I can point out the 634 for
yeah.
It's just to clarify, it's the economic analysis report in 2022, right?
Yep.
Can you point me where in the article it mentions high-speed rail?
You control F634, the word becomes like orange.
Okay, Ron, that's fine. Can you just send the Ferguson?
Yeah, and if you click on the article, it literally is about high-speed rail.
Okay, cool.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, Jay, once you get Ferguson, we can call. I'll stay unmuted too. Oh, okay, I got Ferguson. So
I'm gonna call Ryan and we're gonna run prep.
we haven't run any.
2 minutes used on the dot.
Yep. So exactly 2 minutes.
I'm ready for cross whenever.
Yep. If you don't mind, I'll take first question.
Of course.
All right, let's start time now. Let's talk about your con evidence on lobbying, right? You say that high-speed rail, there was backlash for high-speed rail in Florida when it was rejected, right?
That's our Condon 11 evidence on Republican backlash. Yes.
Right. So is there high-speed rail in Florida today?
No, the reason why we saw backlash was the card tells you when the senator of Florida rejected that plan, the Republican senators there was backlash in Florida for that. So yes, Florida did reject it, but then there was backlash. Your backlash is saying there's backlash for like accepting it, but we're saying that's not the case. The actual case is there was backlash when there was rejection.
So if there was backlash for, if everyone suddenly wanted a high-speed rail in Florida, why isn't there high-speed rail in Florida?
We're not saying everyone wants a high-speed rail in Florida. We're saying there was Republican backlash, which empirically disproves your idea that Republicans are against it and Republicans are against accepting the project. Like we didn't see that in California. We actually saw the opposite happen.
Okay. Yeah, you can have a question.
Of course. Let's go on to your first contention about like one step forward, right? So
Right.
What is the reason why politicians lack support right now? Why do they lack support?
I mean, we're saying that in the status quo, infrastructure projects are moving forward because of the infrastructure bill, right? Like, we're not saying that the infrastructure bill is failing right now. That's like the reason why you shouldn't affirm is because all the benefits that you're talking about are already being done in the infrastructure bill. That's just our argument.
Okay, but wait, but your link, the reason why you can't do both at the same time was that politicians lack support to do both. What is the reason why politicians lack support right now?
Right. So, well, obviously they don't lack support if they're doing the bill. Our argument is that when you affirm the resolution, that's when they lack support because it looks like they're investing all of their political will solely in infrastructure when they could be doing it in things like education, healthcare, technology, etc.
Oh, so the reason why like they're gonna lose support is because they're bettering the country, because they're doing infrastructure that's needed that people want. Politicians
have lots of things to do to better the country, right? Just because if you have like great roads, for example, but no one knows how to read, it probably doesn't help you. Like, it probably doesn't help the country very much, right? Our argument is that politicians have a limited amount of political will, and if they're spending it all in transportation, then they lose elections, so they don't want to do that.
Cool. So just to clarify, really quickly, your argument is if you do the HSR bill, the politicians will not do any single other project like on education, public health, anything else.
No, they'll cancel current infrastructure projects because it looks the same as they're investing in HSR after they've already invested.
It's not the same thing as you just.
I'll take a question. You spend a minute there doing your question. Let's talk about your argument about housing, right? You say that people will just build more houses. Why haven't people just decided to build more houses?
Yeah, so the warranting behind that is when prices are really high right now, then less people buy houses because they can't afford it. So then this stops the actual development of new houses. That's like our card talks about in California. So when you actually lower prices, there's an increase in demand that motivates the government to actually build the houses. So that's
I feel like that's only looking from demand side, not supply. But yeah, we'll get to this later. Jay, are you good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
Order for everyone. It's starting on terrorism. From there, I'll signpost. Is everybody ready? Okay. Okay. Everyone's ready. The place you're voting negative is our argument about terrorism. They make two responses. Their first response is that there's no reason to target HSR. It is literally in our case. They have conceded A, that high-speed rail would be the biggest testament of Western values, and the government had just spent like $4 trillion on the high-speed rail, which is why terrorists would want to attack it to strike a blow against the West. They've also conceded the capacity question that is far easier for terrorists to attack a high-speed rail than anything else because high-speed rail is incredibly digitized. All a terrorist has to do is introduce one piece of malware or hack the high-speed rail, which can cause a derailment. That is in the Murillo evidence, and they never respond to it. They say that we've never attacked Amtrak. First of all, Amtrak isn't a high-speed rail. If you look to other high-speed rails, like places in Europe, there have been 30 or over 30 attacks, and over 900 people have died in high-speed rail terrorist attacks. So clearly the empirics are on our side. They also say that security measures on high-speed rail exist without listing a single one of them. There are more evidence is talking about physical things like fences and sweeping for bombs. It does not mention cyber defense whatsoever. What our argument per the Murillo evidence is that terrorists will cyber attack the HSR, which they have conceded they fully have the capacity and intent to do so. So they cyber attack the high-speed rail the second it is created, which A, kills as many people as 9/11 per the Ryder evidence, and B, causes America to retaliate in the Middle East towards terrorist groups. They have conceded that this retaliation has historically been devastating, with things like 2 million people dying in the war on terror. The weighing is incredibly simple. Firstly, we outweigh all of their case on a prerequisite, because when high-speed rail is blown up, they have conceded the Ryder evidence that no, the plans get canceled because of how vulnerable high-speed rail seems, which means there's no more jobs working on building the high-speed rail. Second of all, another prerequisite, when the United States retaliates in the Middle East, they do things like carpet bombing, which definitionally destroys infrastructure in the Middle East, and also outweighs their case on scope, because it's infrastructure being destroyed all over the Middle East instead of just one project being created in America. Third of all, it outweighs on severity. People die in a terrorist attack and die in our retaliation, which is irreversible. Meanwhile, all of their arguments are about the economy and can be overturned. Go to their case. With that out of the way, they aren't winning any of their arguments. On their first argument about jobs, you can pretty easily extend the Flynn evidence. What Flynn tells you is that people will automate all of the working of the manufacturing project, which means no one gets employed. Their only response is, that's why we need jobs. Our argument is, even if people are willing to work, they'd rather automate it because it's way cheaper. Their next argument is about small businesses, but they fully concede that A, their link evidence doesn't even mention high-speed rail, and B, that small businesses are already booming per the creation of the infrastructure bill, which means you shouldn't risk what isn't broken. Their last argument is about housing, but they have A, agreed to the turn that high-speed rail increases housing prices by sending a signal to investors that housing prices are worth more, which causes appreciation, which turns their link. You prefer this on uniqueness because right now there aren't enough houses in America. They say that's because they say that's not true with an analytic. There's no evidence. They say that's because housing prices are low. That makes no sense. If housing prices are high, people will want to build houses. It's pretty easy. Vote no.
Really quick, can I just see which piece of evidence does not mention high-speed rail? This was your second response on jobs. That's all I need.
It's the economic report.
Okay, cool.
2022.
Then we got it. We'll start prep right now.
Actually, wait, before that, I want to call for the card that says 900 people died in Europe, but I can start prep while you guys send it.
Okay,
We'll start running prep beginning now.
Evidence is sent, by the way.
All right. I believe that's all of our prep. If everyone's ready, it's gonna go jobs, weighing, and then going on to their arguments. Is everyone good? Cool. The easiest place to vote in today's round is on our first contention on jobs, the second subpoint on small businesses. The Department of Labor finds this year that 6 million people are still unemployed. Fortunately, affirming stalls because you're giving small businesses an opportunity to expand. Cardin 21 finds that federal projects mandate at least 11% of contracts have to go to small businesses as each small business helps cut poverty. The Callahan 22 evidence, which went uncontested to, finds that 300,000 people stand to gain from affirming. At the end of the day, they have two responses. The first is that they're going to automate, and then they give you this new analysis saying that, oh, but like even if they do work, they still have an incentive to like maximize this. Keep in mind, Stella already responded to this by saying that's exactly the reason why we need to expand these jobs so that these workers can still there have it so that they can cushion in order for the transition to automation, right? But at the same time, we saw you tell you that the companies, if automation is really that like desirable, probably already maximize all their capacity. Therefore, the opening is still going to be there by people who are like need construction jobs. But more importantly, this evidence is not construction specific. You should prefer our Ferguson 22 evidence, which is extremely specific on construction workers that tell you that there are currently more workers than job openings. We're giving people jobs. But second, their evidence, they tell you that our evidence never mentions high-speed rail. I like please call for it. It literally is titled California High-Speed Rail. There are multiple reasons as to why you're preferring this evidence. The first is on time frame. Keep in mind, our opponents cannot give you a single number as to when this next terrorist attack is going to happen. Instead, we tell you that the moment you sign this bill, the government have to hand out the contracts and immediately, like millions and millions of people are getting employed. But the second is on causation. On their argument about terror, it can happen with or without high-speed rail. It could be on cars, it could be on planes. There's so many other reasons, whereas you know that jobs is solely going to be built because of high-speed rail. But more importantly, on probability, you know that 100% that the bill is going to create jobs the moment you expand high-speed rail versus on our opponent's side, the US already has a lot of security measures such as the FBI or CIA. We tell you that terror is extremely, extremely unlikely. But on that note, gone to our opponent's arguments. We already won the debate, but let's still go on to their argument about terrorism. I just want to first note that cyber was nowhere found inside their case. Please control F it inside the email. This is new analysis. But second, our opponents just assumed that the US is going to retaliate towards the Middle East, which is assuming that the terrorist attack is going to come from the Middle East, probably a pretty problematic assumption. But they still don't win this argument for two reasons. The first is because the more evidence that comes from Stella's rebuttal, which tells you there are existing security measures. Their only response is first, the cyber that never existed in the first place. But second, it's just like you're scanning people. That's literally like what is the security measure is, right? Look at airports. They have like metal detectors and bombs. Every single person that goes into these transport stations need to be like checked. We say that they do very, very thorough background checks. But second, Stella also gives you the preferred analysis that we've never seen this happen in Amtrak. Our opponents say that we've never had high-speed rail before. They literally read you evidence that high-speed rail is the cause for this. If the high-speed rail never existed, they shouldn't have their evidence. Their only way is that it destroys infrastructure, which first is not backed by evidence in the first place. But second, you're always going to prefer probability because like low probability should not be evaluated. If you are always so fixed on probability, you'll never be able to pass any policy. So proud to affirm.
Ryan and I have a minute of prep. We're going to use some of that before the grand cross. I'll put up my timer when the call goes through. Five seconds remaining of prep.
Awesome. You're ready for grand?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
Can I have a question?
So why is a terrorist attack on a high-speed rail inherently improbable per your weighing mechanism?
Let me ask you the question then. When was the last time we saw like a high-speed rail terrorist attack across the globe? Because there are other countries with high-speed rail, right?
Yeah, so that's why I sent you the RAND evidence in the email.
Yeah, it literally says rail transportation. What is to prevent attackers from moving onto high-speed rail? Your evidence is not high-speed rail, it's rail transportation. Just
Okay.
like really quickly clarifying.
That indictment wasn't in your summary, but additionally, it is talking about high-speed rail. The Murillo evidence is about the effects of building high-speed rail in America and citing a statistic about Europe, which is why they're happy.
High-speed
Yeah,
rails
so-
did exist in America.
One, first of all, my partner did mention it in his summary when he says prefer Amtrak over your evidence. But second of all, your evidence literally reads the Rand Corporation noted between this decade that it was almost 250 attacks against all rail transportation. What is to prevent attackers from moving on to high-speed rail? So what is the number they tell you that high-speed rail caused?
What?
So where in your evidence does it say high-speed rail caused this many deaths? Because your argument, your card talks about rail transportation in general.
The evidence is talking about high-speed rail in other countries and saying thus we shouldn't do it in America.
Yes. Where? Because it says verbatim, there were almost 250 attacks against rail transportation, killing 900 people. What is to prevent attackers from moving onto high-speed rail?
If you read
So what is the number for high-speed rail?
If you read the whole article instead of the one sentence, it is clear that it is talking about high-speed rail. May I have a question?
Of course.
Go ahead.
So let's talk about jobs. Why would companies employ people when they have to pay them wages instead of just automating work?
So automation, which first, your evidence is not specific on construction, we'd say we give you much better analysis and the Ferguson evidence. But second, if automation really is as desirable as you say, then I'm assuming that companies have already been on full capacity in turning to automation. This means that the other, like rest of the labor force that they need is going to be employed from real workers. I have a question.
I just want to clarify, because you kind of just went on there, right? First of all, the Ferguson evidence doesn't do any unique comparison. It just says that there's a labor surplus in manufacturing, right? The second issue is that
it doesn't
yes,
say that.
we agree. Hang on. We agree with your analysis that companies want to do automation, which is why we're saying that in the status quo, because automation is happening, if you create more jobs, they're not going to employ 100 people with shovels. They're going to employ one person with an excavator, right? Like the argument isn't that.
Right? So go ahead, actually.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say the argument isn't that necessarily like, oh, it's happened, like it's never happened in the past.
I really don't think that's true in the first place because of the analysis I just gave, which you did not interact with. But at the end of the day, it's final focus. Our evidence was uncontested. You probably should have beat that first in order for analysis to work.
I don't think it was uncontested, but yeah, let's cross.
One cross. Ryan, I have 5 seconds left to prep. We're going to use it.
Okay. It's going to start on the comparative analysis, and then it'll go to their case. Is everyone ready? Cool. First, you said that Jay in summary is cold conceded and frames your ballot. We tell you that because high-speed rail gets blown up by terrorists, nobody wants to use the high-speed rail in the first place, so there's no economic benefits. And also, nobody wants to continue using high-speed rail to create jobs because the government views it as a vulnerable target, so they cancel all the projects, so there's no net benefit, which means if we win any form of argument into the fact that terrorists will attack high-speed rail, we automatically win the round. But furthermore, they just say that infrastructure being destroyed during wars is not carded. It doesn't matter if it's not carded, it's just empirically factual. War destroys infrastructure through things like carpet bombing, so it's necessarily worse. But furthermore, they've conceded that you always prefer death because you can always bounce back from the economy and jobs. Let's talk about terrorism, though. The argument is incredibly simple. We say with the Murillo evidence that high-speed rail hands terrorists a golden opportunity because of the fact that it's extremely digitized. They say it's new. No, you can check the email chain. Murillo tells you that it's digitalized technology that can be taken down and derailed through malware implants. But even if you don't want to buy that, the argument that Jay makes about planting bombs on the track is still basically conceded. So we're still winning the idea that terrorists will attack the high-speed rail, which causes not only massive amounts of deaths, but causes America to retaliate like the war on terror, which killed 2 million lives. The last thing they say is that, oh, we don't know where the terrorists are from and they're not going to be from the Middle East. Afghanistan was literally taken over by the Taliban. I would argue that the probability of terrorism is really high right now. The only chance that you let them do that is by when you build a high-speed rail. Let's go to their comparative analysis, though. They first say that time frame matters more, but there's no warrant on why that's given. We say that as soon as the rail is complete, the terrorist attacks, and you don't want to give them the opportunity to do that. They say there's causation in other places, but we'd say that we'd always say that there's always an incentive to create jobs, but furthermore, terrorists don't have the capacity to attack any other form of infrastructure besides high-speed rail. Lastly, they say the probability, but we'd say that in Europe, rail attacks have occurred. But the reason why they're not winning their jobs argument is the non-unique from Morris. Morris tells you that the infrastructure bill has 100% created jobs in the status quo, which means their argument is already already happening. They say security. No, you can't have security because of the Murillo evidence, because it's already digitized. You can't stop that, but also you can place bombs anywhere else. Automation is basically conceded on their case. The incentives of the companies are not going to hire. They're just going to automate jobs. So there's no net benefit.
Cool. We don't have any prep left, so the order is just gonna go down the affirmative, then weighing, then in my case. Is my Wi-Fi clear? Can everyone? Oh, my. Okay, my own computer is like, okay, it's if y'all can hear me, that's all I need. All right. The easiest place to sign your ballot today is on our second subpoint about small businesses. The story has been extremely clear. While our opponents never extend case, we do. Our argument is very simple. Hardened 21 tells you that 11% of all federal contracts have to go to small businesses. Empirically, that has been what HSR has been for. For example, California has uplifted over 600 small businesses in just by our HSR. Overall, the Callahan card, which goes unconceded, tells you that it's 300,000 people that stand to gain. They tell you a few things. First, they say it's going to be automated. That means like there's like no reason why to create jobs. So realize small businesses are run by people. When you empower small businesses, that is a unique way to create jobs that is not affected by automation. But second of all, we would say that it's not construction specific, as our Ferguson Edison tells you that there's more workers than jobs. If there's job openings, these workers fill much faster than automation. But at that point, we've already really clearly won the round for two reasons. First, on time frame, right? They tell you they prereq everything, but however, the problem with this prerequisite is that terrorism depends on the rail being finished. Meanwhile, like we tell you, send summary is when as soon as you sign your ballot for the affirmative, these jobs for small business are created, contracts are handed out. That is why on time frame we are winning, because at the point where you just sign, you can already help people versus a terror argument. You never know when it's going to happen. You can always solve for terror later, but you can never help these people unless you sign for the affirmative now. But seconds on probability, the reason why you can sign your ballot here is because they're fear mongering. They're basically saying as soon as there's a 0.0% chance of like terrorist attack, you should vote for them. But realize that way no policy can ever pass. Rather prefer the 100% probability that you're lifting 300,000 people out of poverty and giving them jobs. But rather, with that point, let's look at why you can never vote for the argument. The biggest reason why is because the security checks, as Moore 11 tells you, for example, with FBI, CIA, terrorist attacks are extremely unlikely, even if it's digitized. You prefer our empiric of Amtrak never being cyber attacked, nor just attacked by terrorists in general, over their card, which literally says that rail transportation has been targeted, but never high-speed rail. I dare, please call for the evidence. It's not specific to high-speed rail. Prefer our Amtrak empiric. They don't have a single probability on their end. You always vote for the affirmative. Thank you.
Good round, y'all. Thank you for judging.
Thank you guys so much for.
Can I please have the card for the Ryder evidence and the Murillo evidence?
Yeah. I've got it, Ryan.
Particularly the section of the Murillo evidence that talks about malware.
Yeah.
Quick question. Did both teams read direct quotes in the rebuttal speeches when you cited evidence?
Pardon?
Well,
In rebuttal speeches, did both teams read direct quotes for the evidence that they cited?
No.
I think
I
for
don't
me,
think-
it was.
Oh, that's all right. Could you just have send the more evidence from rebuttal security methods?
Yeah,
I think everything else is in the chain.
yeah, Stella, we need to send them more evidence. Thanks.
Ryder and
Okay,
Murillo
right.
just got sent. The part of Murillo that was asked for starts with quote a new HSR system. And it's like the very last paragraph.
Sorry, did you call for the card, like the security, like the more evidence?
Yeah, more. And even if you didn't read direct quote, you gotta have like the part that you paraphrase. So just clearly indicate.
Oh, sorry, Judge, really quickly, I didn't quote more. I quoted their own card about the impact of like killing 900 people on HSR.
I'm talking about a different part though.
No, he wants more as well, so we should send him more.
Okay, yeah.
The
that makes
part about the 900 is already in the chain. I was asking about this one, but I don't think I'm recalling.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, cool. Wait, my computer is lagging. JC, do you mind setting the
Yep, for sure, I got it.
Yeah, my computer just lagged out. Yeah, my entire computer is frozen. I don't know if you guys can still hear me, but I cannot move my screen.
It's fine, Stella, we can hear you.
Okay.
More has been sent. Thanks.
And just to be clear, the rebuttal cited this evidence, there's more evidence, and paraphrase it to say something that's security measures. The parts that were highlighted in the card that you just sent me email chain were the parts.
Sorry.
But
So Stella does her rebuttal off of the flow, so it's never like reading directly from the card.
yeah, I understand, but the parts that you highlighted in the card are the parts that you referenced to paraphrase to whatever was said in rebuttal, right? When you said it happens.
Stella, can you double check, because I don't go through the blocks that you read.
Yeah, give me two. I believe so. I think there's a part in the middle that I do reference that is not highlighted now. That's my mistake. I can highlight that really quickly and resend it.
Okay, just make sure like whatever you send the chain just highlights the parts that you're saying.
Yeah,
we
my
apologize.
apologies.
That's our bad.
Yeah. Hey, it should be sent.
More evidence. Meg, did you send the evidence that you cited in rebuttal response one on the on the app condition 1.2 about Morris? I think 7 million small businesses were created in 2022. The Infrastructure Jobs Act is the bill that you're talking about. If
Yeah, I
not,
can
send it. Again, highlight the part you say.
Morris was read straight off the cut, so I can just send that. Okay, I just sent Morris to everybody. Let me know when you get it.
Got it. Thanks. And to be clear, is this all the evidence that was cited in that response, or were there other cards that you cited in addition to this one?
About
Before you get to the comparison to the EAR evidence, it says it doesn't mention HSR, just everything before that, just Morris was cited in rebuttal, right?
wait, can you repeat that?
You have a response here that says Morris, you created a bunch of jobs, and then you also say like the infrastructure jobs is the infra bill that your case talks about, and then
Oh
later
yeah,
on-
I read Morris, and then I cross applied uniqueness from case as terminal defense to their case.
you send that too, and then
Yeah. Okay, I just sent the cards reference from case about the infrastructure bill.
thanks. Great, sorry for the wait. Everyone's done here. Great. Congratulations, both teams, for making it to the semifinals round. Was a very good debate, close, and just great job. The decision was a 2-1 for the neg from Edina. Someone else voted absolutely.
I was the affirm vote. Did you want me to go first? Okay, thanks. I'm sorry, I couldn't really hear. Yes, I voted to affirm. I find the terrorism argument not compelling. It was carried through and pretty much collapsed on, and I in reading the writer evidence, find that it is almost a propaganda piece instead of like reliable testimony. It's largely against the expenditures and feels like fear mongering to me. So to rely on that so heavily, I couldn't find a compelling reason to vote con. On the other hand, the pro argument I thought was compelling. Even the defense responding to the fact that employment's low, but demonstrating that there's a surplus of construction jobs, emphasizing that these jobs are legislated or required to go to union work, to go to women-owned businesses and small businesses, I felt was carried through the argument strong the whole time. And likewise, that housing demand, there was a discussion about, a lack of, I forget the exact number, 3 million homes nationally. But the notion of being able to decentralize housing for lower land values resonated. I think that is the bulk of. And to get back to the terrorism, I think I thought Pro did a good job of demonstrating that the Morello evidence is really just extrapolated from standard rail and is not actually, while the article itself is about high-speed rail, that what he cites is really status quo, not high-speed rail evidence, and that Moore does a good job of showing that the terrorist threat is non-unique to high-speed rail. But well done on both sides. I'm comfortable being the dissenting vote on this one.
I can go next. I vote negative. The risk that HSR might cause a terrorist attack outweighs the potential job growth. I think the argument is probably absurd, and the writer evidence is trash. It's an opinion piece from the San Diego Times, a chairperson of like a anti-tax group. But unfortunately, those arguments were not made. Taipei spends a lot of time on the Murillo evidence, but not on the writer evidence, which I also think Murillo probably is talking about HSR. I don't think the AF final focus explains the Moore argument enough, which seems to be the main crux of defense against the terrorism attack or the terrorism argument, or at least not explained well enough. Summary just says there are screenings. Actually, they say background checks, but even if they were, it doesn't seem to say that they are trained screenings, but it said that trains are a big threat right now. This evidence would seem to flow negative because HSR would only make that worse, faster trains and such. That's what the writer evidence is talking about. While the negative final focus doesn't spend a lot of time on jobs, I don't think they really need to, since if they win, it's a terrorist attack. They're also likely winning that jobs don't grow post-terrorist attack per their summary and final focus. I don't think the AF responds to this argument very well. Unfortunately, I think a small risk of a terrorist attack outweighs the AF, both on magnitude and mitigates the potential job growth per the negative. Side note, if we could stop using words like prereq when really we just mean that our impact comes first or is bigger or subsumes the other. None of those things are actually prerequisites, but people keep saying that, and it's officially a pet peeve.
Okay, I can go. I voted for the neg as well. I think that the neg wins their case. However, when I evaluate the neg case, there is a lot of evidence that I have to just disregard. It's an out round, so there's no speaks. Both teams were heavily misconstruing, and I can't really drop either one of them because of that. So I'm just gonna complain for a couple of minutes and then move on to the rest of the RFD. Like, I think that the evidence from the neg about security measures is really bordering on like the qualification to be like disqualifying, where it seems like a straw argument that you're citing that there are security measures in these places. In fact, the article cited says that some people want there to be security measures in these places. And it also says that it is not possible to have security measures feasibly on these high-speed trains because they're going so fast in Europe, which is why they're vulnerable to terrorist attacks. And then, in fact, not only does it kind of like contradict that part of the argument, it seems to support the neg, or sorry, yeah, the neg characterization that cyber attacks are a different way of attacking, because the reason why it says it's not a big deal is that the real danger to these trains is like mechanical sabotage, which is kind of difficult, and then the neg gives a way for that to be not so difficult anymore with cyber attacks. So like there's so many issues with this evidence that again, probably like really borderline on, you know, the official NSDA rules. And then other evidence I don't really regard as like the AF claim, or sorry, that was the AF claim, the neg evidence about, you know, this these prior attacks, which was cited as there were a lot of EU like high-speed rail train attacks that killed people, which you know, in that sentence, just like the words high-speed rail would have been directly inserted. So that's significantly changing the meaning of that evidence. I also didn't really evaluate the impact of war and terror just because it was over time in case. So what does neg win though? So I think the neg proves that high-speed rail is more digitized, which creates a service for terrorists to attack. They can take that down. The AF does not respond to this part of the link chain, and they don't respond to the eventual impact that the train goes off the rails, kills people, and death matters on severity, which is read in summary, not really responded to in the AF summary, who kind of says always evaluate a probability, because if something is like kind of just like going in a circle there. I didn't really think that was fully warranted, and it wasn't final focus anyway. So I think the neg has a pretty clear argument, a pretty clearly weighed impact, and thus I think that outweighs the AF case. So the reason I don't think the AF weighing sticks is that the first one about time frame, I think is a pretty neat point to take out the prereq claim that the trains blow up and then nobody gets jobs anymore, because your claim was that, you know, maybe the jobs get created with building the train. So that's all right. But then the other two just seem like defense, like a non-unique saying that terror attacks happen anyway. A claim that's just says like the US has security measures, which sounds familiar. It's probably from the defense on the case, and also an assertion that jobs are 100%. So I don't really believe these weighing mechanisms were sufficient. And then neither of them are in final focus. Final focus just says they're fear mongering. There's like a 0.1% chance this will happen. Vote for 100% probability of 300,000 poverty. Not really sufficiently warranted, and also insufficient, especially when the neg is given weighing mechanisms. And the final thing I think is, even if I drop the weighing and just assume, you know, neg has, you know, maybe won their case, maybe a little mitigated, because like the remaining AF defense just said like Amtrak was never attacked. Even though I think the neg gets around that pretty nicely with their warranting. The neg just drops a very nice non-unique claim on the AF case, and then the AF does not respond to this, that the infrastructure bill, as mentioned in the case, it's creating a bunch of jobs. And I think the AF doesn't extend their overall unemployment uniqueness. They talk about this construction job openings. Now, I feel like not only is the neg evidence small business specific, which is more relevant for the argument that the neg collapsed, or the AF collapsed on, but you know, I don't have to make that comparison, because neg characterized this uniqueness claim as a trend, as something that's happening. So it doesn't matter about the sort of retrospective claims of the AF that we currently have some kind of job shortage. We have a solution here from the neg that they say is more likely. So even if I was to evaluate some probability stuff, it sure seems like a status quo is more likely than whatever the AF case would be. So even absent all that weighing, I think the AF case is at least very heavily mitigated by this uniqueness, like the difference you make from the status quo in terms of creating a bunch of jobs, whereas the neg case has relatively little defense after we strike all the stuff that was misconstrued. So again, I really did not like the evidence in this debate. You know, in an in round, I probably would have given very low speaks and maybe considered dropping one of the teams if the other team wasn't misconstruing, but not much to do about that. So just drop all the arguments and then moved on to debate approval.
Thanks for
Thank you
judging.
so much.
Thank you, judges.
Good luck,
We'll
guys.
move on the evidence standard. Thank you.
Very well,
Good luck, guys. Thank you guys so much for judging.